My name is Jeremy Riddle. Welcome to our farm. We're very excited today to be able to put on a demonstration that we hope will help a lot of farmers and ranchers in the area to understand what crabgrass can do for our farms and for our cattle, for grazing, for hay purposes, and everything else. Obviously, today we're looking at grazing purposes. My name is
So I'm Kenny Simon with the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture. We're here today with Jeremy Riddle out on his farm. Jeremy approached us about looking for a forage that would help to maybe improve the palatability and improve the quality. He's hoping to get a little bit better gains out of his calves, and so we talked a few different options of different routes that he could go, and settled with crabgrass. Crabgrass is a warm season annual. It's very palatable. It holds its quality later into maturity than a lot of other summer grasses. Now, for the producer's purpose, he's looking at it from a grazing standpoint, and crabgrass is a very good option for grazing. A lot of times crabgrass will get a bad rap because of the fact that if crabgrass gets into a Bermuda grass hayfield, Bermuda grass is going to dry really quickly. Crabgrass dries slowly, but from a grazing standpoint, it offers a lot of advantages over our traditional Bermuda grass and Bahia grass. And so what we're looking at doing is in this field, this has a warm season base. It's primarily Bahia grass out here. There's a little bit of Bermuda grass. There's some fescue. We went in with a pint and a half of Roundup prior to today's planting, so we could suppress it. So we've got the big area behind me where we suppressed it, and then we left a control strip, because a lot of times when we're talking with producers on trying to help them with their establishment methods, and we talk about going in there with a light rate of Roundup to suppress it, you get a lot of hesitation and a lot of concerns. Well, I don't want to kill my existing grass, and so what we did in this situation is it was a pint and a half per acre. It was meant to suppress it without actually killing it. You know, if we're trying to kill Bahia grass, you're probably looking at 2 quarts per acre multiple times for the year. We're not trying to kill it. We're just trying to suppress it so that these crabgrass seedlings can get a foothold and be competitive with everything else. We did leave a comparison strip. So what we're doing for this trial is we have a control strip where we just went in and we mowed it off to approximately 4 inches. And then with this bigger strip, the larger strip is where it's suppressed. Now, in addition to those establishment methods, we're also looking at what's going to be the better alternative for seeding. Is a no-till drill? Is it the best way to go, or can I accomplish the same thing with a drag and broadcast? So for the no-till drilling, we've used the Faulkner County Conservation District has a Haybuster 107 no-till drill. It's 10 feet wide on 7-inch centers. So that was our drill, and then for the broadcasting, we used a precision rate variable seeder with a little chain harrow behind it to help scratch the ground up a little bit and help to improve our seed to soil contact. You know, so some of our more popular options for grazing, pearl millet's one. That, I mean, you could go either way with it. You could choose to graze it. You may even work great if you was wanting to do a hay crop out of it. But crabgrass is one that, you know, for the majority of the producers, the majority of the calls that we get of somebody needing a summer annual, right now the very popular thing is crabgrass. And one of the reasons, and crabgrass has a lot of benefits for being so popular right now, and you know, and we've all thought about crabgrass in our hay fields. You know, if we're trying to put up Bermuda grass hay and we've got crabgrass out there in it, well, you know, the crabgrass is taking longer to dry, and it's going to turn colors on us, and it's not that real pretty green that we'd like. But from a nutritional standpoint, crabgrass will be better quality than Bermuda grass. The palatability of crabgrass is better than Bermuda grass. And the yield will be similar. Under similar management, the yields between crabgrass and the crabgrass and Bermuda grass would be pretty similar. Now with crabgrass, by definition, it is a annual. But crabgrass has the ability to reseed itself. It produces a lot of viable seed. And so if we establish it year one and we let it go to mature seed on those plants, we can keep that crabgrass coming back year after year. But it has to go to seed in order to do that. It's not a perennial that's going to come back from the roots and the stolons the way that Bermuda grass does. It's not going to come back from crowns the way fescue does. And so, you know, for those reasons, we've got to manage it a little bit differently than what we would our Bermuda grass. You know, Bermuda grass will take continuous grazing. You know, we can have Bermuda grass on our property and the gates will be wide open, and the Bermuda grass will tolerate that continuously overgrazing. Crabgrass is not going to. Crabgrass is much more palatable, so they're going to go to it. They're going to go to it first, and they're going to keep it gnawed off into the ground. And crabgrass is going to rebuild from the leaf area. You've got to have leaf area out there for them plants to be able to regrow and really get up and be active and actively produce a lot of forage. So, you know, if we're thinking about crabgrass, we need some type of rotational grazing program. You know, and we talked about the different programs at last month's cattlemen's meeting. That rotational program may be as simple as shutting the gate and moving them from pasture 1 to pasture 2. The better job that you do with your rotation, the better job you do with the forage management, you'll see some benefits of that. But with crabgrass, you've got to have that rest period on it. Otherwise, the animals are just going to continuously overgrazing it, and with time, it's going to fade out and disappear. You know, crabgrass is one of those that, as far as for establishment goes, the establishment on crabgrass, and I'll let Mr. Kevin talk about what we've done here, but a lot of times when you're looking at the time frame for planting crabgrass is about from mid-April through early June. So crabgrass will grow at a little bit cooler temperatures than what our Bermuda grass will, so we can plant it a little bit sooner. You know, and crabgrass works really good as a crop if you wanted to do a pure stand of crabgrass and just kind of have a monoculture. It works very good like that. If you've got a stand that's maybe it's primarily a fescue base, and over time that fescue has kind of started depleting a little bit, and you're starting to get some undesirables come in there, and you just a lot more bare ground. It's an area that you can't use much in the summer. This crabgrass will work really good to go in there and act as a supplement. You know, so you can act, you can grow the fescue in combination with the crabgrass, and that works really good as a combination mixture. You know, if we start talking about pearl, millet, and sorghum Sudan, those are pretty much monoculture stands. We're going to go in there and do some type of pasture renovation, whether that's disking or with herbicide, kind of suppress what's there, plant into it. With crabgrass, we do not have to do a complete elimination of everything that's out there. You know, what we do recommend is if you're going to, and it's anytime, it's not just crabgrass, it's anytime you're planting into existing forage during the growing season, you need to suppress that forage with herbicide. Mowing it alone, grazing it alone does not stunt the plants enough. If you're putting a new seed in the ground, that new seedling has got to be able to compete with them existing grasses that are already there and already sprouted. And they just get out competed. So we've got to do some type of suppression. Now, with crabgrass, it's a small seed. So it's going to be a really shallow planting. You can get away with a broadcast seeding. You know, that's going to be the most common method of planting crabgrass, is we're going to mix it with some type of carrier, whether that's maybe it's pellet lime, whether it's some fertilizer. We're going to use a carrier product to help us get the desired seeding rate and to get it spread. But we can also no-till it. Now, if we're no-tilling crabgrass seed, we've got to make sure that we're getting a coated seed. Raw crabgrass seed will not flow through the no-till drills. They're too light, they're too fluffy. You won't get a good even distribution coming out of the boxes. But the variety that we used out here is called Mojo. Mojo is sold by Barrenbrug Seed Company, and it's Red River crabgrass and Impact. So it's a blend with Barrenbrug Seed Company's coating on it. So with Mojo, you're getting a blend of crabgrass varieties that's been coated to flow through a drill. Now, my preference on planting is anytime I got the option to use a drill, I'm going to use a drill. But with the drill, the number one reason for stand failure is planting too deep. And if you just go, and the Conservation District is a great service that has no-till drills available. But if you was to go get that no-till drill, you pick it up and immediately put seed in it and start planting, you're probably not going to be happy with it. You've got to take the time to get that drill set up correctly. And that's true with any equipment that we're running. You've got to take the time to set it up correctly. But if you take the time and you make sure that you've got seed flowing from the hoppers through the tubes down through the disc openers, you've got seed flowing correctly, you've got it calibrated correctly, and that you've adjusted the depth of your seed, with a no-till drill, I can get good uniform spacing of all my seeds in kind of a precision rows. And when I'm doing that, I'm getting ground coverage faster than what I can if we broadcast it. Now, if we do a good job broadcasting, we can achieve the same results. If you take a broadcast seeder and you just immediately pour seed in it without calibrating it, you're probably not going to be happy with the seeding rate, but your seeds will be placed at the right depth. But I like the no-till drills, you know, when we have that option. A lot of us may not have that option. You know, the no-till drills are a pretty expensive piece of equipment. Not all of us are able to own one. The broadcast seeders can be a great option. And the one that I've got with us today, and this is actually the animal science department. This is a precision rate variable seeder. And what this does is it has a monitor on it. And with that monitor, it's going to ask me a series of questions, and I'm going to punch in an answer. All right, so it's going to ask me what my seeding width or what my swath width is. We punch that in. It's going to ask me, what's your desired seeding rate? It's going to ask me our miles per hour. Once we go through that list of question and answer, we'll put seed in that hopper. We're going to put a catch pan underneath it, and it's going to flow seed through there. And as that seed is flowing, it's calibrating itself. And then once it gets calibrated, we can go to the field and start planting. You know, that machine, you know, that gator's has got the speedometer on it, tell us the miles per hour. It's electronically controlled. Now, the nice thing about that variable seeder is with that particular one, it's adjusting the seed flow as you have variation in your speed. You know, so if we're broadcasting, just like if we're spraying, our rate is affected by our ground speed. With that unit, it's adjusting for that. If we set it for 5 miles an hour and we go a little bit over or under, it's adjusting that seeding rate accordingly. So that's a pretty nice piece of equipment that we have there that's much more affordable for the average size producers to get one of these. Now, if you looked at the price compared to that, and if you shopped around and just said, okay, what can I go and buy me a broadcast seeder for? And you compare that price to something like this, you may have a little bit of a sticker shock. But if you compare the price of a no-till drill to what that is, that's a lot better price than what a no-till drill is. And for small seeds, we can achieve the same thing. Bermuda grass, crabgrass, clovers, you know, brown top millet, ryegrass, turnips. We can do all of that. What we're not gonna, and if you're doing a prepared seed bed, then you can put whatever you want to in it. But if you're just looking at trying to do a drag and broadcast method versus a no-till, we can get equally good stands as long as we take the time to get our equipment set up correctly. Is there questions on this part? And then I'll let Mr. Lawson talk about the demonstration, what we've done out here.
All right, good deal. Easy on the Mr. part. All right. So I hate that we can't go out there because it really is kind of interesting to go out there and see the suppressed versus the non-suppressed and all of that. And I want to reiterate what Kenny said. Branch, do we need to work on those drills before we start planting? Absolutely. Just last week we were helping Branch calibrate a drill, and you need to go through there and make sure they're all cleaned out. And so what we were wanting to look at here, we started out with suppressed versus non-suppressed, and then we coupled that with drilled versus broadcast spreader. And so we talked to Jeremy, and we come out here and we looked at what they had, and so we recommended a pint of Roundup to start on the suppressed part. And we asked him, you know, leave us some that's not suppressed, and we'll come in and we'll graze it or we'll bush hog it or something, try to get it down as low as we can. But we still wanted to have that green material out there. So this handout that I gave y'all pretty much talks about the dates and the times and, you know, what we put out there. So we planted on May 4th. On the back, it's got the hay buster drill is what we use to do the drill part. For the broadcast, we used the spreader, and then we turned around and hooked a tooth har onto that, a spike tooth har, and went through and tilled it in with that. There is a plot plan here on the back kind of showing where everything's at. Again, we're not getting to see it out there. I wish we could. But he come in and we didn't graze it, but he come in, he bush hogged it just as low as he could. So that first plot, which is 101 at the bottom, that's bush hogged and drilled. So we ran the drill down and back. And then the second plot was broadcast, where there was no suppression, but it was bush hogged. And then we come in with the broadcaster, we kept going where we had suppressed. And I'm going to tell you, the pint of Roundup did a great job. When I say Roundup, I guess I should say glyphosate. So that's Eraser, that's Credit 41, that's anything that has glyphosate, 41% glyphosate in it, okay? I'm using Roundup, but anything that has glyphosate. And we use 16 ounces. Really be careful with your glyphosates. There's 5-pound material out there, 51%. There's different quantities of, you know, the actual material in there. So when I say glyphosate, I'm talking about 41% glyphosate. So that's your Credit 41s and those. Eraser. So we went out there and we did the broadcast. It did a really good job. So that's plot 103. That's broadcast, and then we come in and we dragged it. And then about when you get to the Kwanzaa hut here, that's when we started with the drill. And then we drilled into a suppressed sod situation. It just happened at the end of that, on the back side, he had an area that he didn't bush hog and we didn't suppress. So there's two little blocks, that's 105 and 106. And that's into actual standing grass that was about this tall. We're going to just talk about results a little bit.
Yeah, go
okay.
Go ahead.
So I come out just a week ago, like last Friday, kind of evaluated what we've got out there. I will just tell you hands down, and I wish you could see it because you would see it out there. Wherever we put out glyphosate and we suppressed it, we have a stand of crabgrass, and it's a heck of a stand of crabgrass. It looks really, really good. And I really can't tell any difference between the drilled versus the broadcast. I think they both did an excellent job. I ain't going to say I got down on my hands and knees and I really, really looked in that non-suppressed area, but I did bend over for about 2 seconds. It's about all I could stand and looked, but I could not see any kind of stand in anything that was not suppressed with glyphosate. Even if we bush hogged it down, and then definitely where there's grass standing, there is nothing out there. So I'm a real big believer in going out there with your glyphosate. You're not killing that Bermuda grass or that Bahia grass. The Bahia grass is already starting to green back up out there. We didn't kill anything. We just suppressed it to get the crabgrass a chance to really start coming back. Now the only thing I don't know, and Jeremy, you might correct me if you really looked at it, but we had a problem with some of our cups. We didn't get them all cleaned out like we should, so we was having some overflow problems. So there's some areas out there that looks like where we drilled, we actually looks like we broadcast because seed was falling out, but it still had a really good stand. So whichever way you want to look at it, we got a good stand of crabgrass. But this goes back to any of those annuals. You've got to suppress that sod, and it's winter annuals, it's summer annuals. You've got to suppress that sod with a little bit of 41% glyphosate, or you're really going to be disappointed in your stand.
Did you mention the seeding rate?
Seeding rate was 6 pounds. That's on the front. 6 pounds of the Mojo crabgrass, 1.5 pints of the glyphosate, and then he bush hogged it to an inch of 4 inches, a height of 4 inches.
Yeah. So a typical seeding rate for crabgrass, if you were trying for a pure stand, is 4 to 6 pounds per acre.
Yeah.
And we chose 6.
Yep.
For this right here. You know, if you want to back that off a little bit, you can, no problem. You can go down to, you know, if you're just trying to fill in some gaps, you could probably do 2 to 3 pounds per acre and still get a good stand. But what we was trying to accomplish here was, you know, we wanted to get ground cover just as quickly as we could. So we want, you know, and so anytime that, you know, if you go on the higher side of your seeding rate, it's going to fill in quicker and there's less likely for some undesirable stuff to fill in. So, what questions did y'all have about the project?
Just to add on that right quick, we planted it May 4th was a Monday, and we got a 1/4 inch of rain on Tuesday and a 1/2 inch of rain on Wednesday. So we did have a very good, the rain was perfect for getting this stand up. So I wanted to add that in there because before that, we haven't had much rain. And it kind of started right about when we planted this. So we've had good rain on this field.
So my counterpart, Dr. Jonathan Kubesh, has been doing some work the last couple years on looking at timing of crabgrass establishment. So he's been looking at a March planting versus April. So what that's doing is kind of doing a dormant seeding versus an in season. And the overall gist of it, our recommendations of planting in April are right where they need to be. Planting in March is just a little bit too soon. So, but yes. Okay, yeah, so good, yeah, very good. Thanks for that. Okay, so once we have planted it, we've got about to keep the animals off of it and let those plants get up and established. If you're grazing it, ideally you let it get to about 12 inches and then you take it down to about 4 inches. If we're doing it for hay, you know, we're gonna let it get a little bit bigger than that, you know, but to get to that point of 12 inches, ideally situation like what we're getting just immediately here in May, you know, we've planted it into a suppressed sod, we got rains, we'll continue to getting rains, 40 days, it may be there. Most times it may be closer to 60 days. But you've got to plan for that period between planting and first utilization, regardless if that's a hay harvest or it's grazing. You've got to plan for that that growing period.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Did he fertilize that?
Gerald.
No. So that's what I was actually just fixing to hit on, was the fertilization part. We've had this conversation last week or a couple days ago about fertilizing these annuals when you plant them. If you go by extension recommendations, you need to put out, of course, if you're doing it for hay, you put out a third of your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium at planting, and then come back after each harvest if you're going to do it for hay. Or if you're going to do it, if you're going to graze, you'd come back, 60 days and put out some nitrogen. I'm not so sure that we need to be putting $900 urea on something I just put a seed out there for. How long is that urea going to stay out there? So I like to wait about 14 days, get some emergence, and then put my fertilizer out there where that plant's utilizing all of that. So we actually just put out a plot yesterday, me and Corbin did, on some pearl millet, where we're putting out nitrogen. He planted it 2 days ago. We put out nitrogen yesterday, and we're going to put out nitrogen in 14 days. And we're going to see if there's a difference. But when urea costs and fertilizer costs as much as it does, you want it to utilize it the best you can. So if I'm going to put out any nitrogen, I'm going to wait until I've got a stand and I've got a plant that's got a root system that's going to take that nitrogen up. Your phosphorus and your potassium, you can put it out anytime. It's going to be there. But we could lose that nitrogen. So if you might want to add to that. But that's my thinking, is I'm going to delay my nitrogen application until I get a little bit of a stand. Like right now would be perfect.
And on the nitrogen, one of the things that we've got to be cautious about with crabgrass, just like with pearl millet and sorghum sudan, is it can accumulate nitrates. And you get to a high level of nitrates and it becomes toxic for our cattle. Our standard recommendation, if you've got a perennial warm season grasses, Bermuda grass, Bahia grass, Dallas grass, it's 50 pounds of nitrogen to produce a ton of dry matter. For these summer annuals, they're more efficient use of fertilization. It's 25 pounds of nitrogen to produce a ton of material. So like Kevin was saying, if you're delaying that nitrogen application, 50 units of nitrogen is as much as you want to go. And you may even want to back off that a little bit. Because our recommendation is going to tell you 100 pounds of nitrogen for the season, and that's based on a 4-ton yield.
Yep.
So what I like to do is I'm going to plant, especially if it's crabgrass, we can plan for at least 3 grazings out of it. So do I want to split my nitrogen application, that at emergence after the first grazing, then come back after the second grazing? But with the crabgrass, the cattle aren't going to utilize it once a frost hits on it. And so you've got to be careful of how late in the season are you going to fertilize it. Yeah. Bermuda grass, we're going to recommend stockpiling it, putting nitrogen fertilization on it in August, and stockpile it and use it later in the dormant season. With crabgrass, we can't do that. We've got to utilize the crabgrass before that frost hits it.
We'll talk about that for a second. When you get to the end of the growing season, it's an annual. You're going to have seed. What call it? You just let it lay.
So at some point in the year, that seed has to mature on the plants before you utilize it. Okay, now when is that? You could choose to do that early in the season, mid-season, late in the season. My preference is probably going to be late in the season. Is during June and July and August, I'm going to try to utilize it. But maybe sometime mid-August, I may pull off of it for 6 weeks or so and let those seeds mature. And how do you check if you have mature seeds? If the seed heads are on the plant, just take your hand and run through it. If the seeds are coming off, you've got mature seeds. But mature seeds, it's going to be brown at the top of it. It's going to be wilted. But the seeds have to mature on the plant.